The air in the high-end appliance showroom felt freezing, though maybe that was just the chill of watching my daughter-in-law spend my money in her head. Sarah marched down the wide aisles, her heels clicking sharply against the polished concrete. She examined every stainless steel surface as if she were a queen inspecting her treasury. My son David trailed behind her, nodding at whatever she pointed at. I leaned on the handle of my purse, keeping my distance. Honey, I found the perfect $18,000 refrigerator. Sarah practically squealed, waving her manicured hand at a massive matte black unit. It has a built-in tablet, dual craft ice makers, and a glass panel that turns transparent when you knock on it. David swallowed hard, glancing at the price tag. Sarah, that's a lot for a fridge. Oh, don't be cheap, she retorted, crossing her arms. Your mother's old fridge is an eyesore. If we're going to host my friends for the holidays, we need this. It's an investment. I stayed silent. Sarah loved using the word we. We need this. We should upgrade. Yet it was always my house, my electricity, and my bank account footing the bill. I had let them move into my spacious suburban home 3 years ago when David lost his job. He found work again, but they never left. Let's just get it. Sarah urged, her tone shifting to that sweet, demanding register she used when she wanted her way. Go ahead. Pay for it before someone else grabs it. David looked at me, a silent plea in his eyes. When I didn't reach for my wallet, he sighed and stepped toward me. Without asking, he reached directly into my open purse, expecting to pull out the premium credit card I usually kept in the front pocket. But when he opened the flap and looked inside, his hand froze. He didn't pull out a card. He just stood there staring into the dark leather interior. Slowly, all the color drained from his face, leaving him pale and wide-eyed. What he found wasn't funding for a luxury fridge. It was the end of an era. Sarah tapped her foot impatiently. Well, hand the man the card, David. I have a nail appointment in an hour. David's fingers trembled as he finally pulled his hand out of my purse. He wasn't holding a shiny piece of plastic ready to tap on a card reader. He held 2 jagged halves of my premium credit card cut right down the magnetic strip. Beneath those broken pieces, he had seen a neatly folded withdrawal slip from the bank. The slip clearly showed that the household emergency joint account, the one they frequently dipped into for dinners and vacations, now had a balance of exactly $0.00. Mom, David whispered, his voice barely carrying over the hum of the showroom refrigerators. What is this? I took the 2 halves of the card from his shaking fingers and dropped them back into my bag. That is expired, David. Just like my patience. Sarah frowned, marching over. What's going on? Did her card get declined? Just use the backup one, David. There is no backup, Sarah, I replied smoothly. I closed the joint account this morning. I also canceled the supplementary cards. Sarah's mouth dropped open. She looked from me to David, waiting for him to fix it. You can't do that. We have bills tied to those cards. The streaming services, my gym membership, the dog groomer. Then you'll need to update your payment methods with your own debit cards. I answered, adjusting my coat. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't create a scene. I just turned and walked toward the exit. Wait, Mom. David hurried after me, leaving Sarah glaring at the $18,000 refrigerator. You didn't even talk to us about this. How are we supposed to manage? I stopped near the glass doors and looked at my son. He was 32, healthy and employed, yet he looked like a lost child. You manage by checking your own bank balance before shopping? I suggested quietly. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the crisp afternoon air, leaving them to figure out how to get home. I had my own car keys, and I was done being the driver. I drove home in total silence, enjoying the quiet hum of the engine. For 3 years, my house had felt less like a home and more like a crowded hotel where I was the unpaid staff. When David and Sarah first moved in, it was supposed to be temporary. 6 months to get back on their feet. But 6 months turned into a year. Then 2. Sarah slowly took over the kitchen, rearranging my cabinets and complaining about my vintage cookware. She filled the garage with boxes of seasonal decorations she bought online but never unpacked. David just nodded along, avoiding conflict at all costs. He wanted peace, even if it meant sacrificing my comfort. I never screamed. I never threw plates. I simply watched. I watched Sarah throw away my favorite coffee mugs because they didn't match her aesthetic. I watched David use my credit card to pay for their weekend getaways, always promising to pay me back next month. Next month never came. I am not a victim. I allowed it to happen because a mother always hopes her child will eventually step up. But hoping without boundaries is just funding your own disrespect. The breaking point wasn't a massive argument. It was a Tuesday morning when Sarah tossed her dirty laundry onto my bed and told me to make sure I separated her delicates. She didn't ask. She instructed. That afternoon, I drove to the bank. I didn't draft an eviction notice right away. I just started moving my money. I removed David's name from my primary accounts. I rerouted my pension deposits. I took back the invisible strings they had been pulling for years. Pulling into my driveway, I looked at the large 4-bedroom house my late husband and I had worked decades to pay off. It was mine. Every brick, every shingle. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house was quiet for now, but I knew the storm was coming. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of iced tea, and waited for the sound of their car in the driveway. The locks were still the same, but the rules had entirely changed. 20 minutes later, the front door slammed shut. Sarah stormed into the kitchen, her face flushed with anger. David followed closely behind, looking like he wanted to sink into the floorboards. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was?" Sarah snapped, tossing her designer handbag onto my clean kitchen island. The salesman looked at us like we were peasants. "You left us stranded at the mall." I took a sip of my tea. "You have a rideshare app on your phone, Sarah. I'm sure you figured it out." "That's not the point," Mom David intervened, running a hand through his hair. "You cut off the cards. You emptied the account. We rely on that money for groceries and household stuff. You rely on it for $18,000 refrigerators and luxury gym memberships." I corrected him calmly. "I buy the groceries, I pay the utilities, I pay the property tax. Your income goes entirely to your own entertainment." Sarah crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "We live here too. This is our home. We contribute to the energy of this household." I actually laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh, just genuine amusement at her choice of words. Energy doesn't pay the light bill, Sarah. Money does. And starting today, my money only pays for my expenses. "Fine," she huffed, lifting her chin. "If you want to be petty, we'll buy our own groceries. But don't expect me to cook for you anymore." She hadn't cooked a meal for me in 3 years, but I didn't bother pointing that out. Arguing over details was a waste of breath. "That works perfectly for me," I agreed. I stood up, took my glass to the sink, and rinsed it. "Oh, and one more thing. I'll be needing the spare key to my car back, David. The one you keep on your keychain." David blinked, stunned. "But I use your car for work sometimes when mine is low on gas." I held out my hand, palm up. "Gas stations accept debit cards, David." "The key, please." He hesitated, looking at Sarah for support, but she was too busy glaring at the refrigerator we already had. Slowly, he unclipped the key and dropped it into my hand. The metal felt cool and heavy, the weight of control returning to where it belonged. The next morning, I woke up early. Usually I stayed in my room until 9 so Sarah could have the kitchen to herself for her morning yoga and smoothie routine. Not today. At 7 sharp, I walked into the kitchen. Sarah was sitting on the floor in her expensive leggings, eyes closed, soft meditation music, playing from a smart speaker. I walked past her, opened the pantry, and began taking out the expensive imported snacks she bought with my money. I placed them in a cardboard box I had brought from the garage. Sarah opened one eye. "What are you doing?" "I'm meditating. I'm clearing space," I replied, tossing a bag of organic chia seeds into the box. "Since we are managing our groceries separately now, I am designating the bottom 2 shelves for your items. The rest is mine." She scrambled to her feet, turning off the music. "You can't just pack up my food." "Where am I supposed to put my juicer?" "In your designated space or in your bedroom," I answered, not missing a beat. I moved to the fridge and started shifting her fancy sparkling waters to the bottom crisper drawer. David shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "What's all the noise?" "Mom, what are you doing?" "Reorganizing," I stated. I handed David the cardboard box filled with their snacks. "Take this to your room, please. I need the pantry space for my canned goods." "Mom, this is ridiculous," David groaned, setting the box on the counter. "You're treating us like tenants." I stopped wiping down the shelf and looked him dead in the eye. "Tenants pay rent, David. You are guests. And guests do not dictate how the host organizes her kitchen." Sarah scoffed, grabbing the box. "Come on, David. Let her have her little power trip. She'll get tired of this by tomorrow. She needs us around." They marched down the hall, whispering furiously. I didn't feel angry. I felt incredibly light. I finished cleaning the shelves, placed my favorite coffee beans front and center, and brewed a fresh pot. The smell of rich, dark roast filled the kitchen. For the first time in years, the house actually smelled like mine. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find my daughter Claire holding a box of pastries. Unlike David, Claire had moved out at 22, built a steady career, and never asked for a dime. She visited often, mostly to check on me, usually ignoring Sarah's snide comments. I brought the good croissants. Claire smiled, stepping inside. She paused, looking around the living room. "Wow. Where are all of Sarah's creepy ceramic cats?" "In a box in their bedroom," I replied, leading her to the kitchen. Claire let out a low whistle. "You finally did it. You pushed back. I just stopped pretending I was comfortable." I poured us both coffee. Just then, David emerged from the hallway, looking stressed. His face lit up when he saw his sister, Claire. "Thank God." "You need to talk to Mom. She's acting crazy." She cut off the joint account and boxed up our food. Claire took a slow bite of her croissant, chewed and swallowed. "Sounds like she's acting like a homeowner to me, Dave." "She's trying to force us out," David complained, leaning against the counter. "We can't afford first and last month's rent on a new place right now. Not with my car payments." "Then maybe you shouldn't have bought a luxury SUV on a middle management salary," Claire pointed out flatly. "Mom is 70, David. She shouldn't be funding your lifestyle. It's not just me. Sarah needs things a certain way to feel comfortable." I placed my coffee cup down. "Sarah's comfort is not my financial responsibility, David. If she wants a certain lifestyle, she needs to earn it, or you need to provide it. I am done doing both." David looked completely defeated. He had always relied on Claire to mediate, hoping she would take his side out of sibling loyalty. But Claire had my spine. "Look, Dave." Claire stood up, brushing crumbs off her jeans. "You have a free place to sleep. If that's not enough for you and your wife, start packing. But don't you dare raise your voice to Mom in her own house again." David backed away, muttering under his breath, and retreated to his room. Claire looked at me and winked. The foundation of their entitlement was cracking, and it didn't cost a single argument to break it. By Friday, Sarah decided her strategy would be passive aggression. She left her dirty dishes in the sink, forgot to take out the trash, and blasted the television in the living room while I tried to read. She thought she could annoy me into submission. She thought wrong. Instead of arguing about the dishes, I simply placed them in a plastic bin and set the bin outside their bedroom door. Instead of yelling over the television, I picked up my phone and opened my provider's app. With 3 taps on my screen, I downgraded the premium cable package to basic local channels. Then I went into the Wi-Fi router settings. I changed the password from Family Home 2023 to a random string of numbers only I knew. At 8:00 p.m., Sarah had her friends over in the living room for a reality TV watch party. I was upstairs reading a book when I heard the sudden groan of disappointment from downstairs. Footsteps stomped up the stairs. Sarah banged on my bedroom door before opening it without knocking. The Wi-Fi is down, and the cable box says we aren't subscribed to this channel, she demanded, her face red. Call the company and fix it. My friends are waiting. I marked my page with a bookmark and looked up. The company didn't make a mistake, Sarah. I canceled the premium cable. I don't watch those channels. But I do, she shouted. Then you should open an account in your name and pay the bill, I replied smoothly. And while you're at it, you'll need to set up your own internet service. I changed the Wi-Fi password. I don't want your devices slowing down my connection. Sarah stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. You cut off the internet. While I have guests, I cut off my internet, I corrected. Please close the door on your way out. There's a draft. She slammed the door so hard, the picture frames rattled. I smiled, opening my book again. True power isn't yelling the loudest. It's holding the keys to the kingdom and simply locking the gates. The internet incident pushed Sarah over the edge. The next morning, she and David cornered me in the kitchen. We need to talk, Sarah stated, planting her hands on her hips. This toxic environment is ruining my mental health. You are making it impossible to live here. I agree, I said, pouring my morning tea. David looked relieved. Good. So you'll turn the accounts back on and stop this nonsense, no, David? I agree that it's impossible for you to live here anymore. I walked over to the kitchen drawer, pulled out a simple 1-page document I had printed at the library, and slid it across the island toward them. It wasn't a complex legal trap. It was a standard 30-day notice to vacate. What is this? Sarah scoffed, barely glancing at the paper. It's a deadline, I explained calmly. You have exactly 30 days to find a new place to live and remove your belongings from my house. If you are not gone by the 1st of next month, I will hire a moving company to place your items in a storage unit, pay for the first month, and change the locks. David went pale, looking at the paper as if it were a bomb. Mom, you can't kick us out. We're family. Family respects one another, I countered. Family does not treat a mother like an ATM and a maid. I love you, David, but I will not live with you anymore. Sarah let out a harsh laugh. You wouldn't dare? You'd be completely alone. You need us here to keep this big house running. I looked at her truly, looked at her, and felt nothing but pity. Sarah, I managed this house for 20 years before you arrived, and I will manage it long after you are gone. 30 days. Start packing. I didn't wait for their response. I picked up my mug and walked out to the back patio to tend to my roses. Behind me, I could hear Sarah yelling at David, blaming him for not controlling his mother. For once, her voice was just background noise, fading into the distance. They didn't believe me. For the first 3 weeks, David and Sarah operated under the assumption that I would cave. Sarah bought new throw pillows for the living room couch, and David asked me what was for dinner every night only to be met with a blank stare. On day 28, the reality finally hit them. At 9:00 a.m., a professional moving truck backed into the driveway. Two men in uniforms stepped out. David rushed out of his bedroom still in his pajamas. "Mom, who are these guys?" He panicked watching them carry heavy dollies into the hallway. "Movers," I answered, directing the men toward the living room. "Take the sofas, the dining table, and the guest room furniture. It's all going into a pod in the driveway." Sarah emerged, her face horrified. "What are you doing? Where are we supposed to sit? We haven't found an apartment yet." "That sounds like a scheduling issue on your end," I replied. "The living room furniture is mine. I am having the carpets deep cleaned and the floors polished. I need the space empty." The movers worked quickly and efficiently. Within an hour, the shared spaces of the house were completely bare. There was no couch for Sarah to lounge on, no large TV for David to play video games on. The house echoed with emptiness. David stood in the middle of the empty living room, his shoulders slumped. The arrogant posture he's carried in the appliance store was entirely gone. "Mom, please." His voice cracked. "We looked at places, but everything requires a huge deposit. We have nowhere to go." I felt a flicker of maternal ache, but I stamped it out. Softness had built this entitlement. Only firmness would break it. "You have 2 days, David. I suggest you start calling friends with spare rooms or look for a short-term rental. The storage unit for your belongings is already booked. The keys to the house will be left on the counter on Friday morning." I turned and walked to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. I didn't need to yell. The empty rooms spoke loud enough. Friday morning arrived with a cool, refreshing breeze. I woke up at 7, walked into the kitchen, and found 2 house keys resting on the granite island. The driveway was empty. They were gone. I didn't know exactly where they went, and for the first time in 3 years, it wasn't my problem to solve. Later, Claire would tell me they rented a cramped 2-bedroom apartment across town. Sarah hated it, and David had to pick up extra shifts to cover the rent. Life was finally teaching him the lessons my money had shielded him from. I made my coffee, poured it into my favorite vintage mug, the one Sarah had tried to hide, and walked out to the front porch. The neighborhood was quiet. The heavy, suffocating energy that had filled my home was entirely lifted. Around noon, Claire dropped by. She brought fresh flowers and helped me direct the movers to bring my furniture back into the clean, polished living room. "It feels huge in here." Claire noted arranging the lilies in a vase. "It feels like mine," I corrected softly. I sat on my sofa, running a hand over the fabric. I didn't hate my son. I hoped that one day, when he learned how to stand on his own 2 feet, we could have a relationship again. But it would be on my terms, with strict boundaries and absolutely no shared bank accounts. I thought back to the appliance store, to the $18,000 refrigerator that started this final avalanche. Sarah had wanted a machine that made ice in the shape of stars to impress people she barely liked. Instead, she got a cold dose of reality. I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the perfect, uninterrupted silence. Some people think a mother's love means sacrificing everything until there is nothing left. But true love sometimes looks exactly like a broken credit card and a locked door. I smiled, setting the mug down. The house was finally mine again, and the peace was worth every single penny I didn't spend.